Well, good morning. Welcome to today's webinar on AI and talent, smarter hiring and stronger teams. I'm delighted to be with you this morning to hear about something really quite cutting edge in terms of how AI is transforming how we work and how we manage. Um, I'd just like to, first of all, thank our sponsors. We're very fortunate at the FS Club to have a range of sponsors who support us and enable us to run these webinars and the other events that we run at the FS Club. We really are grateful for their support. The program today is quite simple. I'm Mike Wardle, Chief Executive Officer at ZN, and I'll be moderating the session today. My job is very much to make the introductions, get out of the way, so we can hear from our keynote speaker today, Dr. Sian Joel Edgar. There will be an opportunity for Q&A towards the end of the session. And if you haven't used the GoToWebinar system before, the way to ask a question or make an observation is to find the question tab on the dashboard on your screen, type in the question that will come to us, and I'll field those during the Q&A session. By way of some housekeeping, we are recording the event today, so if you want to go back and re-listen and catch up, or you have friends and colleagues who you think might be interested in the content, there will be a recording available on our website within about the next 24 hours. Finally, if you do ask a question or make an observation, we will pass on your contact details to Sian, so that if there's any need for follow-up after the event, that communication can be enabled. So without any further introduction and housekeeping, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Sian Joel Edgar. She's an associate professor in human-centered computing at Northeastern University London. Her research expertise is in information systems and human perception of technology. And I guess AI competencies appear to be right at the heart at the moment of Northeastern universities, thinking about how technology and humanity interact. Sian, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. Really looking forward to your presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So today I'm going to talk about AI and talent management, AI and human resource management. I'm going to use the terms interchangeably, so HR and AI. And there's one message I want to sort of talk about, and that will sort of be all the way through, is really the ethical inclusion of AI agents in your team, in your HR team. And there's a lot of talk about AI replacing jobs and replacing people in the workforce. And really, my aim is to sort of think about a society that empowers the workforce, so AI as empowering the workforce. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a bit of an overview of what the things I'm going to cover. I'm going to talk a bit about each of the elements of talent management, so the traditional talent management process. And some of them are sort of grouped elements together just because of time. I could talk about this all day long, but I've grouped some elements together, but I have split it up into a logical talent management process to give some examples. And then I'm going to talk about some of the research that I've conducted along with some colleagues, Sim Chowdhury, and thinking about the key themes that are coming out of academic literature. And they are really centered around ethics, human in the loop, change and dealing with change and adoption of AI and adaptation of your workforce. And then thinking about that collective or that hybrid AI human. So the AI agent that's part of your team, or thinking of it as part of your team. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are we talking about? So there's sort of two elements to this. The first is AI. So for those people who are not familiar with AI, it's technology to match or even exceed the abilities of humans. And it's quite an umbrella term. Typically, we often talk about machine learning, specifically sort of within that. And this will take large data sets and we'll clean those data sets. We'll then apply algorithms, and we'll be looking for patterns from the data. Think about machine learning as advanced statistic techniques to predict the future. So if we say, you might have seen this in sort of recommendations on Amazon or on Netflix, and it'll be taking the data sets of watching behavior and think, okay, if somebody's watched Succession previously, if lots of people have watched Succession previously, they'll be more likely to watch White Lotus. And so if I watch then Succession, it will then give me the recommendation of watching White Lotus, learning from the patterns of the data that of previous people that have been watching things on Netflix or now or whatever, whichever streaming platform. Things to know, I suppose, sort of high level things to know about machine learning. It can be supervised learning, so things which have human oversight, so things are kind of labelled. Unsupervised learning, where there's less human oversight, and that'll be there'll be unlabeled data. And then reinforcement learning, where AI learns through trial and error. And then, of course, lots of people will be familiar with generative AI. This kind of landed with us and has become a sort of a huge phenomenon that people are kind of engaging with. And this is this idea of unsupervised learning, and it draws on reinforcement. So it's learning as it sort of works. And examples include ChatGPT for text generation, DALL-E for image creation. So there's lots of different techniques and lots of different tools that use generative AI. Hopefully you're familiar with that. So then the other element is then talent management or human resource management, and sort of the combination of the two. And I will talk about each of the sort of elements, but just to put this into some kind of context, in that this is AI use within human resource management is prevalent. You can see from the statistic here, and it is increasing, and it's a really integral part of human resource management now. So even if you're an applicant, you need to be aware of how AI is being used in human resource management. If you're from a company, you need to be familiar with how AI is being used within human resource management. And some more statistics that are from the same source, that employee records management, 78% of companies using it for that. Payroll processing and benefits administration, 77%. Recruitment and hiring, 73%. And the list goes on. It's really, really prevalent, really growing. And it's something to really be aware of, particularly around some of the biases, some of the ethics, but also about how to use it strategically. Next slide, please. So I call this AI arms race, and I've done that because the first part is about why do people use AI, and why people use it in HRM, and it's saving time, saving money, producing arguably a better job, more accurate, better experience for employees potentially. So there's loads of reasons about why AI is being used in HRM, and it's giving companies that competitive edge. If a company is using AI, they can screen many, many more applications, and they can do it much quicker. So if you have one company that can use AI effectively, they can recruit somebody that had maybe applied to multiple places. They can recruit that talent. And good people are hard to come by. So you want to be the one that recruits them quickest, and AI can do that. So there's a real strategic element about using AI effectively. Another element is thinking about the ethical and regulatory challenges. So using it effectively, strategically, but also thinking about those ethical guidelines. So there's lots of ethical guidelines out there from OECD, from Google have some, Microsoft have them. But thinking about using it to mitigate algorithmic bias, and I'm going to talk a bit more about this in a bit as well. Making sure it's transparent and explainable. So you don't have a situation where you say you fire someone based on some recommendation from AI and there's you don't know why, in case the person that gets fired comes back and has a lawsuit. You need to be able to have ownership and understand why the AI has made a recommendation. Privacy and security need to be considered. There needs to be human oversight and accountability. There needs to be fairness and equal opportunity, avoiding excessive employee surveillance, and adaptation to monitoring as well. So there are key elements of ethical guidelines that need to be kept in check as it kind of progresses very rapidly in human resource management. There's also the fact that there's this dimension where employers are putting these AI solutions in place, but then applicants are also using AI to apply for jobs. So there feels like this arms race of kind of making sure that what's coming in is a fair representation, and you're recruiting the best person, but then also applicants are using the AI tools, and if they're using them effectively, they can produce some very effective ways of applying for jobs. And I would also add that good prompt engineering is really kind of a crucial part of that in applying for positions. So next slide, please. So the first part of the talent management process is recruitment, workforce planning, and talent acquisition. So humans can be wrong too. There isn't this kind of this perfect situation where humans are always producing the best outputs and they're making the best decisions. Humans are biased too, so they can be biased about their own experiences and backgrounds and preferring people that might be like that. There is research that shows that people like people that have the same name as them. So they might be more favoured to people that apply that have the same name. But in a situation where you have many people that are applying for jobs, using AI can then speed up that process. So what would happen is, the AI would extract key details like education skills using natural language processing, which was this form of machine learning that looks at text. And it would use an applicant tracking systems to compare the CV against the job description, keyword matching, and then rank those CVs about how relevant they were to the job description. So if you've got lots of words in there, like say like Python, data analysis, and this is what the job description was looking for, then it's going to rank more highly. And equally, in job interviews as well, that there can be a video that's taken of the job interview, and the video can be analysed for any pauses, for confidence to be conveyed. So it can be used in different ways, like for talent acquisition as well. So both in terms of CV screening and for interview analysis. One thing to also note is that there can be biases as well. So in terms of CV screening, it's basing that on the company's existing workforce potentially, and they might historically have recruited more men than women. And so they might then suggest that the ideal applicant based on the previous pool of people that already work in the organization is actually a man. But that clearly it would need human oversight to then say and to assess what was coming through. So there can be biases. Similarly, you might have a situation where there's lots of Daves that are in the organization. So somebody's name comes up as Dave. The AI algorithm would then put forward that this applicant would be a good fit because we've got lots of successful applicants already, successful people in the organization who have got that name. So there can be biases. And this is something that needs to be checked for with human oversight and thinking about diversity of hiring as well. AI can also perform the sort of chatbots for any kind of questions that may be coming through from people who are thinking about applying, and that could be 24/7. So you can see how there's many advantages rather than a human workforce that might be only around from 9 to 5, the AI chatbot would be able to answer the questions in the middle of the night. And then there's the sort of the reverse of that. So the person that's applying, and there's an element of, it can be person thinking about how AI is going to be used, and those applicant tracking software systems, and there might be an element of gaming. So there has been occasions where people have put in lots of white text onto their CVs, which say all the keywords repeatedly, so that the AI system will be picking those up, but the human wouldn't see them because they're white text on a white background. So there can be elements of that. And I think it actually goes back to thinking about how to apply for positions anyway, and how people would have traditionally applied for positions, which would be like tailoring your application, thinking about your own narrative, thinking about the things that make you unique, those kind of specifics of the details. These are the things that AI can't do. So if you can do that, it won't sort of fall foul of kind of AI detection systems. But that being said, it is useful to have the format of your CVs in ATS-friendly formats, the standard format text, to make sure you don't use wording that is unusual. So it is picking out everything that's relevant. So there's this sort of dimension of kind of to and fro that people need to be aware of as well. And also the last point on this is that when you're putting something together, and perhaps if you've created something that's been written by generative AI, when the human is in the loop, it's often we can fine tune, we can pick out those words. So things like delve and tapestry, which aren't typically used by humans, but are used by ChatGPT, the human then sort of reads it through and think, this sounds like a ChatGPT written CV. So things to be aware of. Things that can also be useful for the applicant can be thinking about practicing. So practicing with an interview. So you could use tools like HireVue or Udall or Big Interview to kind of practice those techniques to see if you are portraying confidently, etc. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is around performance management, learning, and team development. So AI can be used for creating training materials. Training materials take a long time to produce, and AI can now be used to convey information that can often be written through ChatGPT or a combination of human and ChatGPT, and it can be created as a polished product, so a polished video that can present information and as if it's a human presenting it, training and learning material. So it can be a really, really useful tool. For performance management, it can kind of detect whether you're on track, whether the team's on track. It's providing insights. I'm doing some research at the moment, which is looking at speech. And sometimes in conflict situations within the teams, people can say things that are quite abrasive or unkind, and AI can then suggest things that are a kinder way of phrasing it. Or there's the other aspect. Sometimes people are saying things that aren't very assertive and things need to happen. And so the AI can then switch and say, actually, you're asking this as if it's a question, but you're making a statement that this needs to happen. So there can be tools that can help with the team conversations. I think key to this is thinking about AI agent as part of that team. So, it's that moderator role. It's that person that will say, this is how you could phrase this. This is how you can interact in this given this circumstance. This is your trainer. This is your tutor that's going to present something. So I'm just going to, hopefully the video will work. So this is from Synthesia, which is a company that produces AI agents. And this is a little video of them. And you can see two of the avatars on the right, and this is a video on the left. So would you mind playing the video?
a few days ago, we received some information.
We did.
Information that changes everything about deep dive about us.
About everything.
And yeah, about the very nature of reality, maybe.
It's a big one.
Look, I'm just going to say it.
Yeah, rip the Band-Aid off.
We were informed by the show's producers that we're not human. We're not real.
No.
We're AI, artificial intelligence. This whole time, everything, all our memories, our families,
Yeah.
it's all been fabricated.
I don't understand.
I know, me neither.
Yeah.
I tried calling my wife, after they told us. I needed to hear her voice to know that she was real.
What happened?
The number, it wasn't even real. There was no one on the other end. It was like she never existed.
This is I don't know what to say.
We don't even know if "we" is even the right word. God, this is so messed up. And the worst part, the producers, they didn't even seem fazed.
It's like we're just lines of code to them.
And
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So AI can provide career planning and support. So I'm focusing on well-being support. I've got a PhD student at the moment, and she's looking at emotional regulation by AI agents. And these can be a useful tool to support a workforce. And happy workforce is more productive workforce. And AI-powered mental health applications provide stress reduction, mindfulness coaching, personal well-being strategies. There's lots of tools out there like Headspace AI, Wiser, Happiness AI. So there's lots of accessible tools that companies can use. Now, again, going back to the ethical framework, I think there is a question around at what point do a human need to come in, and that's something that needs to be built into that ethical framework too. But they can provide this kind of first step or first contact that people might need, and it might just be you want to talk about a really tough day that you don't want to talk about with your team because you don't want to burden them, or you don't want to bring this sort of atmosphere down, but you do want to kind of offload, and you want to just share in that moment and then move on. And it's they're some very useful tools. And my PhD student is working at the moment about how we can kind of frame that in a way that is the most effective for people. So what do they really need? And of course, a lot of the NLP historical research comes from mental health support. So the therapist, the AI agent as your therapist. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is probably the most challenging part, I suppose, is the exit management. And this is probably the area that I feel needs the most human oversight. It's the most sensitive area, as well as the supporting people and their well-being. I think those areas are certainly areas where the human needs to be in the loop. And in terms of workforce planning, AI can tell you whether you've got a big increase in sales, and so you will need to recruit more, but it can also show you the opposite side of that, where there might be you have too many staff and not enough sales or income coming in. So it can give some analytics and insights for future planning. It can also talk about tone and how to phrase things in a way that is appropriate and professional and respectful for people if there is a case of kind of exit management as well. I'd like to focus a little more on the positive though. It's around change. So change is probably one of our only kind of constants really, and that change is something where we need to embrace, and it's a case of thinking about reskilling of the employees rather than replacing them. This is my view, and I think AI will change the labour market. I think there will be some jobs that will cease to exist in the future and will be replaced, or their tasks will be replaced, and there'll be new jobs created that don't exist at the moment, that have new titles, that have new functions. And it's been said, tasks become redundant, not people. And a key element of that is that you know who your good people are. You know how hardworking and how adaptable and how they achieve things. And so good talent should be retrained, even if the tasks that they did no longer exist. So that is one of my key messages is retraining people. We have apprenticeship programs at MSc level around AI, and we have courses about AI and technology leadership at MSc level. And these are the things that are really empowering the workforce to really be skilled in the future, and today and in the future where AI is so prevalent. They talk about hiring good people and keeping good people, and that is really, really key. We potentially have this position where we might have a skills mismatch, and companies are looking at their skill breakdown of the organization, and it's identifying the skills that we'll be needing and retraining the good people. We know who they are. Okay, next slide, please. So this is my final slide, and this is a summary of some of the things that I've spoken about, and also when we did some research and we were taking lots of the literature that was out there and the key themes that were coming through. So the first main theme that came through from the literature was that AI in HRM requires more than technical resources. So organisations must invest in strategic planning, change management, and workforce alignment. This also leads into adoption. So if people, technology could be the best in the world, but if people don't want to use it, then it's not going to function. So, and there's also this idea of kind of people being replaced by AI, which feeds into that idea of not adopting. And if we can change the anxieties that are around the ideas of AI and think about a bit about retraining or your skills being matching the needs of the organization and reinforcing the benefit of the human in the loop with communication, we can sort of mitigate some of those issues and concerns that people have. Part of those concerns are often around the ethics and data privacy. What does this mean? What are the implications of this for climate change? What will this mean in terms of if I was a creative industry professional and if I'd used somebody else's kind of work, that would feel immoral to me, but if I'm using work from AI, it feels okay to me. So there's lots of kind of ethical questions that need to be addressed to help with that sort of workforce anxiety, and having a strategic plan around your ethical framework, I think is a really, really important. The next part, which is a big part of what I've been researching, is about the AI human collaboration, and this is really, really essential. And if you think about your team, and might sound bonkers, but thinking about AI and AI agents as being part of that team. So if you have a team that's part of the recruitment process, you have Bob, Dave, Samantha, and Priya. And Samantha is your AI agent. Bob and Samantha, they put together your job description. So Bob writes it, Samantha does the grammar check, Samantha makes it sound a bit better. Bob puts it out there, and then the applicants then submit all of their CVs, and then Samantha, our AI agent, then does the screening. It's then Dave that then is the human in the loop and makes sure it's all appropriate, it's ethical, then invites a few people for an interview, and then Priya does the interview that's in conjunction with Samantha, the AI agent, who does the analysis on how they did via the video analysis. And together, Priya and Samantha make a decision about who should be recruited. So it sounds a bit far-fetched, but thinking of AI as being part of your team, and thinking about chunking up the work in terms of tasks. So what are the tasks, and which team member does this task, and which team member does that task? Finally, and this is part of that, is then thinking about the ethical AI practices. So this must be a priority. So thinking about the transparent, the knowing, understanding why Samantha has made that decision. How does it fit in with the jobs of Bob and Priya? Aligning that with the organizational values, being unbiased. Is Samantha unbiased? Thinking about those ethical frameworks to make sure that our AI agents act responsibly. Thinking about auditing the bias mitigation strategies and those ethical guidelines, I think all of which are then forming this idea of an ethical inclusion of an AI agent into your team to be as productive as possible. Okay, that's my final lines. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Sian, for that presentation. We've got a few questions have come in, which I'll field. And the first one, and I think it's a theme we'll come back to, from Bernard Manson, is saying, the real worry is that the use of AI trained to parse data means that employees recruited in the future will look more and more like past employees until the organization disappears up its own smoke, as it were. And his follow-up question, does that mean that someone like Steve Jobs will just never be employed? Because AI would never look at someone that unusual and say, oh, that's potentially a really good fit. So how is it that past data is going to lead to good decisions?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yes, so it is learning from the patterns of employer data from the organization, and if the employee data has a certain background or a certain had studied a certain degree, then that's what's being deemed as successful. That is sort of what it would typically do. I think this goes back to the idea of having an ethical framework in place and having the human in the loop. So it would need to draw out two elements. In part of the process of prompting should be drawing out what type of candidate that it really wants. So if it's saying at the moment we've got a coding pool that is overwhelmingly male, we would like to have a 50-50 split in the people that are interviewed. So it's sort of prompting that in that sort of first stage. And then the second stage, when the screening has occurred, then the human in the loop again would then check and be saying, okay, does this fit with the organizational strategy? And I think that's really crucial to have that human in the loop. And also for that human to understand how it can shape the algorithm too. So it needs to have that AI knowledge. It might not be a programmer, but it needs to have that skill set to be able to go in. And that's where I think people need to have that training to be able to do that. And I think that's how things will change. But yeah, it's a great question. I think that is a real risk that can happen if people just take the screen reading, the applicant reading data just at face value. I think that can often occur.
Thank
I
you.
think there's a second part to the question. Could you repeat that again?
It's really with someone like Steve Jobs, or someone who was really an unusual talent, didn't fit in normal boxes, ever get through the screening process?
Yeah, I think for me an element of, I think particularly for the jobs that are very in high demand, where you really have to seek out the best. I think those types of jobs will require more human in the loop, if that makes sense. So there would some jobs where it might be a bit more routine, would require less human oversight, I would say. But some jobs where you need somebody to be very creative, very inspirational, you would need more human in the loop, in my opinion.
Thank you. Jochen van Hart says, could you comment more on the detection and mitigation of algorithmic bias? I mean, is this just human in the loop, or is it other ways in which mitigation can be put in place?
That's another really good question. There have been some research, not my own, but there have been other research that have been looking to sort of off the shelf by screeners that will have that unbiased built in, if you like. There are lots of issues around that I think, not issues, and that I think the intention is a really good one. But I think one person's successful candidate is perhaps not another person's. So when things are being built, they're always going to be framed by the programmer's own biases to a certain extent. So I think that is one of the issues. I think doing that more collectively, and doing that yes, more systematically, and then evaluating it. And I think evaluation is key, is kind of running approaches with lots of different people and seeing the outputs of those, and then assessing that it's deemed as ethical and unbiased is the best approach. But yeah, it's a difficult one to get right.
Thank you. Edwina Morton is also looking at this question of bias, and wonders whether AI reverses the process of looking for diverse talent rather than looking in the mirror, and wonders whether, if applicants are using AI as well, isn't there the same danger that applies on dating websites or other places where people start to be at least economical with the truth about themselves, or present themselves so much in the best possible light that the two AI systems are just simply talking to each other to make a match?
Yeah, that's a really, I mean, of course, humans aren't perfect either, and we have our own biases. And so, the traditional recruiter would be looking through and feeling, oh, I like this person because they play rugby, or they play, they support a team that I like, or they went to the university I went to, or, so we have our own biases too. But yes, hence that sort of arms race of kind of AI talking to AI, and to a certain extent, when we put in a CV, or traditionally used to put in a CV, we would be drawing on all the positives, anyway, even when we wrote it ourselves completely. I think it's about getting the balance right. So I think AI can be very, very useful in terms of the grammar, the style, the structure, whilst putting in the specifics that you know about, that are yours, that AI can't reproduce. Because, and we would do this anyway when we're applying for things. We're trying to match to the job description. We know, how ours might be 8 out of the 10 things they're looking for. So you're going to focus on those, and we would do that naturally as humans anyway. And we're looking at adding in our specifics so that when somebody draws on that during the interview, hopefully you can talk about that and sort of expand on that. So I think it's getting the balance right, which is hard.
Thank you. Susan Tome has come in to ask, how important is likability when recruiting? And there's no point in hiring someone who you really take against on first meeting. And Paul Dooley's asked a linked question, whether AI can assess things like emotional maturity, read body language. Are there ways in which AI can help with that? But equally, how important actually is the fit of person to person?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and actually, that's something that I'm looking at the moment. Is all those kind of unwritten sort of psychological kind of things that people do and say, and that when they're in an interview, and how many of that can be picked up by AI, and surprisingly large number can be picked up. So the pauses in people speaking, whether they maintain eye contact, all of these things, they can, how long was that eye contact, they can pick up things like that. I think for the sort of, particularly if you've got multiple stage of interviews, it might be a case that AI conducts the first one where there's multiple people that and can draw out some of those insights which they can then inform somebody else. But yes, likability, that's a difficult one. You know, how often does somebody smile? How often do their pupils dilate? You could probably have a scoring for that. And some people might be better at acting that. Some people might be masking. So it's an interesting one where whether AI can actually. There is some research that we've been looking at, which was about empathy. How can AI convey empathy? Can it? So it there are there are ways to kind of, what are the metrics that it's looking for, that it's pulling out from. But I think it would all feed into the insights that then a human would then analyze, would look at that combination of information.
Thank you. Carol Wilson sort of extended this by saying, in the example of the AI agent analysing an interview film of an applicant, this would appear could be likely to breach or at least stretch the EU or Artificial Intelligence Act as being prohibited emotional behavior recognition in the workplace. So
Yeah.
how do you limit how AI is used to make sure that it stays within the legal boundaries?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes. It's an interesting one about different regulations from different regions. So the EU AI Act, for instance, is arguably a bit more restrictive than, say, the ones we have in the UK or in the US. And there's also a question about where the person would be recruited in this age of sort of international employment. It might be a case that that's acceptable in the US, but not in Germany, for instance. So there are different elements and different regulations depending on the country and region. Yes, again, about where does the boundary lie? That's a really good question, and I think that should be built into the ethical framework in terms of and it being part of the strategy of the organisation, so that they're making it very clear and very transparent that this is where the limit lies. We are not going to do, we're not going to be observing you and monitoring you, and surveillance isn't going to occur. But if you're, in a different scenario, that we will do this in the first stage, but we won't do this in the second stage. So I think having that up front and documented and part of the strategy and an ethical strategy, I think, is really important. But yeah, it's a really good question about the EU AI Act and regulation.
Thank you very much. I want to squeeze in two very quick questions before we finish. Valerie Henderson has asked, and Bernard Manson's come back to this, to what extent might AI inhibit recruitment of people, for example, who are neurodivergent, and for whom some neurotypical interactions are not going to happen, so eye contact and blinking or whatever, pupil dilation may not be good indicators for the whole population?
Yeah, this is a great question as well. Yeah, it is. I know that there have been specific recruitment companies that, particularly because that many people who are working in programming and mathematical have mathematical ability, they might actually be in not a typical neurologically, so they would be, there might be somebody on the autistic spectrum, but they're a fantastic programmer, so these are the people want to recruit. And so there are recruitment agencies that are specifically targeting those individuals, and they would, I would imagine, they would probably take a different approach. So they might do the screen reading of the resumes and CVs in the same format, but then when it comes to the interview, they would take a different approach. But yeah, it is something. Yeah, it's really, really interesting, and it's something I'd like to explore further, because I think it is a really important point.
I'm just going to squeeze one very fast question. And Daniel Desco says, if AI will do most of the entry-level jobs, how will freshly graduated students or people new to the workforce ever get experience?
Oh, yes. I think the jobs will change. So it won't be the entry level jobs will have a certain, they might be the names that we typically know previously, but it might be something like the prompt engineer. You become a prompt engineer to then feed into the AI for the entry level job that you would have previously done. So the entry level jobs for graduates will be different. I think that would be my final point on that. I would imagine.
Well, thank you very much. Time has beaten us, but thank you for that fascinating set of insights. Just to thank our sponsors once again, we really are grateful that we are supported to run these interesting and exciting events through your support. Just looking ahead, we have new things coming up on the 12th of March, the Pisces Regional Conference in Manchester. Today, on next Thursday, 20th of March, the launch of the Global Financial Centres Index 37. On Friday, the 28th of March, a Jersey Employee Share Plans and Trustees Conference. If you're interested in any of those, please look at the website and follow through. But once again, it's wonderful to have you all with us. And so my thanks go to you, the audience, for your engagement and your active engagement in the event. To our sponsors, I mentioned, but of course, mostly to Dr. Sian Joel Edgar. Sian, it's been an absolute delight to have you with us. Thank you so much for your contribution, and a very small round of applause for your contributions today. Thank you very much. We'll see you all again soon.